this lesson, we're going to look at factoring trinomials, but slightly more difficult cases where we have other common factors that need to be factored out first, or we're working with fractions and varying other things. So in this first example here, you'll notice that we have negative 3x to the fourth plus 15x cubed minus 12x squared. So you'll notice that there is a negative 3x squared that is a factor of all of these three terms. So if we factor negative 3x squared out of this trinomial first, let's see what we get. So for this term, we get x squared. Now here we're factoring out a negative 3, so that's going to leave us with negative 5. And we're factoring out x squared, so that will leave us with x. And here we're factoring out negative 3 out of negative 12, so we'll get a plus 4 there, and the x squared factors out as well. Now we have a trinomial of the form that we can factor nicely. So we're going to look at the factors of 4, and we want something that sums to negative 5. Now, in the previous lesson, we looked at if this was negative and this was positive, then our factors of 4 have to both be negative. And you'll see right away that negative 1 and negative 4 sum to negative 5. And so our factors then, we have this negative 3x squared here, and then these will be our two values for our binomial x minus 1, x minus 4. And you'll notice if we FOILed this part, negative 3x squared, I'm going to put that out there. If we FOILed to make sure we got the correct answer, this would be x squared minus 4x minus x plus 4. You'll see that this gives us the trinomial that we originally had. X squared minus 5x plus 4. And that's our original one. So yes, indeed, those are the two binomial factors of this trinomial. So sometimes you need to factor a common factor out before we can look for binomial factors. Okay, another example here is where, let's go down. In this example, you'll notice that our term for C also has a y variable. So now we want to look at the factors of 28y squared. And we want something that sums to negative 11y. We know that the value for x here we'll get when we factor those binomials, and x is the first term of each of the binomials. So we're just worried about the y here. Now again, because this is negative and this is positive, our two factors must both be negative. So negative 1y and negative 28y. We also have negative 2y and negative 14y, and negative 4y and negative 7y. And you'll notice that these two factors here sum to negative 11y. So those will be our two, these will be our two factors for our binomial, for our values for m and n. So then our factors here become x minus 4y, x minus 7y. And again, we can double check that by FOILing again. There's our x squared term, minus 7xy, minus 4xy, and plus 28y squared. And if we combine our two like terms, this gives us negative 11xy. Okay, let's look at one more example here, and this is an example where we have a fraction. So again, we want to look at the factors of our value for c, which here, factors of negative 1/8, and we want them to sum to positive 1/4. So remember when we're looking at factors of a fraction, so we need one of them is going to be negative. Our numerators in our factors have to both be 1, because when we're multiplying these two together, we're going to get negative 1. Now, our options for our denominator then could be 1 and 8, because 1 times 1/8 is, or sorry, negative 1 times 1/8 is negative 1/8. Now, we could also have 1/2 times 1/4. Or we could have positive 1/2 times negative 1/4. So you'll notice that in this case here, these two, if we were to add them, 1/2 minus 1/4 is going to give us 1/4, which is what we want for our value for b. So 1/2 minus 1/4 is equal to 1/4. So these would be our two factors for our binomial. So we would have x plus 1/2 x minus 1/4. And again, if we wanted to double check by foiling, here's our x squared minus 1/4 x plus 1/2 x minus 1/8. We're multiplying 1/2 times 1/4 gives us 1/8. And combining these two like terms would give us positive 1/4 x. I'll just write those other two terms there. And yes, indeed, that did FOIL out to be our original expression.